as part of the research, I went and I talked to people who do pruning, gardeners that are really good at this stuff. And they told me consistently that you prune in 3 different contexts, okay? But you don't prune those 3 contexts unless they're in relation to something. And what you're pruning them in relation to is a vision. So if you don't know what you're pruning towards, then you're just kind of cutting costs probably. But you're not getting purposefully transformational. So the first thing, that's why we started yesterday, about getting the vision clear and getting the vision clear around that table. You want to have an interesting team experience? Hand out 3x5 cards and have everybody write down, without talking to each other, write down what you think your vision is, the church's vision, your team's vision for transformation, and then compare your cards. And what you want to get to is the place where the team turns their cards over and they all say the same thing. So you got to get clarity on what it is you're trying to build. Or you're going to go build off kingdoms that don't have much to do with each other. So the first thing is if you're going to prune a rose bush, you got to know what a rose looks like. What are we looking for so we know what to prune, because it's not going to become that. And we want to keep what is going to become that. So the first thing we prune is a bush produces more buds than it can sustain. Sometimes I tell the business example. I had a friend that bought a company. It had about $25 million in sales, and within 5-6 years, he had taken it to $500 million and was approaching $1 billion. I asked him one day, how did you do this, from this to this? He said, well, when I started it, we sat down. He said, and I realized that the life of the company was in about 20% of its activities. Oh, the rest was losing money? He said, no, the rest of it was profitable. But the life, the future of the company was in about 20%, so I got rid of the 80%. Told the management team, come January 1, I don't want to see any of this stuff anymore. Get rid of it. And he said, I got all sorts of pushback. Well, that's what you're going to get. He said, but then we got rid of that, and then we had all of our resources and people. We could focus on the 20% that was the future and go build it. So around your table at some point, you've got to ask, what do we have? Because over the years, you start this group program and this ministry and this outreach and this, that, and this, that. And when you got your vision clear, you got to ask, what doesn't drive that vision? We got to cut it. And you will get into conflict about that. And that's why team values and oneness is something you got to work on building, which is another topic. But you're going to get into conflict. That's good conflict. Do not have power plays in that conflict. Have power struggles, because you want to have iron sharpening iron and hear everybody's opinion. And if you're a leader that stamps out opinion, or somebody at the table doesn't get a voice, you got to solve that first before you have these kind of conversations. Okay? So what's good, it's great. Choir robes, nothing wrong with choir robes, nothing wrong with organ music. Not our deal. We're going to get rid of it. There's churches that do that. Okay? Number 2. There are some branches that are sick and they're not going to get well. We fertilize them. We try to help them out. We put them in the sun. We give them more water. We give them minerals. We give them plant food. In California, we talk to them in the hot tub. But it's just not going to get well for whatever reason. And there are visions and ministries and all this kind of stuff. And we heard a great example from Oak Brook yesterday, that church, Dan's example about that, where they did a whole strategy and then they took reveal and they realized this isn't going to work. No matter how sincere, and they had the courage to prune it. This could be a strategy. This could also be a person. Talked to a pastor who said, my small groups leader, I was out speaking somewhere. He said, my small groups leader is just not happening. He's been over this thing for 4 years, and I don't really know what to do, and it's not growing. I said, well, why has this been allowed to exist for 4 years? He says, well, he's really good friends, and everybody loves him. And there was a personal loyalty that was getting in the way of the stewardship of what needed to be done for the ministry. And that is a conflict that you will run into over and over and over. And you have the stewardship to make that hard call. I'm writing a book right now that has a story in it about a guy that owned a business, and his son was the heir apparent, and it was going to go to him. And he had a different management style. He was very harsh and critical and demanding, the son was. And so one day on the factory floor, he berated an employee in front of a bunch of other employees, and the father happened to see it. The father called him into his office. And he said, Joey, or whatever his name was, I wear two hats around here. I wear the boss hat, and I wear the father hat to you. Right now I'm going to put on my boss hat. You're fired. Because as a boss, I have to do that. That cannot exist in this company, and I've warned you several times about this, and we've talked about it, and that cannot exist in this culture, and it will not, and as the boss, I must let you go. Now I'm going to put on my father hat. Son, I heard you just lost your job. Can I be of help to you? And you know what? You're going to have to, with some people, I'm your boss and I'm your friend, and you need to clarify that, and you need to go around that team sometimes and other places and realize this is not clear, this is messy, but there are hats, and can we have as a value, we will do what is right for the bride, even when it causes us to do some hard things. Because Aunt Mabel may be really invested in that ministry, and that's going to be hard. And what I've seen about these things are, A, it's so hard to make these decisions. B, once you make them, it's way worse than you thought it was going to be. And C, once you get through it, you ask yourself, why didn't I do that sooner? Because you're on your way and you're not pulling the dock with you. Okay? And then the third thing is there's a lot of dead stuff. It's been dead for a long time. It's just in the way, and we have not gotten around to clipping it because dead stuff really doesn't squeal that much. So, it's not bothering us and we can just ignore it. But if you would clean out that wing of the building, you could have maybe a ministry there. We don't have time, right? So I'm going to end with this. I'm going to ask you to look at your hoarding behavior as a team.